Good afternoon. This is a Devar Torah on Purim. And what I would like to do in this Devar Torah is explain some deeper aspect of the holiday of Purim, Megillas Esther, and also try to relate it to the incredible events that are occurring as I'm speaking and have been since Shabbos morning, in the beginning of the United States and Israel intervention against Iran. Now, first focusing on the story of Megillah Esther, which is the Megillah we read on Purim. If one looks at it on the surface level, it seems the chief villain is Haman. Now, while Haman obviously is a key player, he read Safek, doubt. His gematria is the same as the word Safek, and he's trying to sow doubt and confusion and evil, which personifies Amalek's ancestor. There is also another aspect here that is less paid attention to. And what I want to do basically is deal with that aspect, which is Akashverosh. It says, B'yamei Akashverosh, Hu Akashverosh. And then it goes on to describe that he's the fact that he's the king of 127 provinces. Now, that being the case, there is still a question here of why that extra wording, no wording in Chumash or Tanakh, is extra. I could have simply written it could have been written Akeshverosh, Hamelech, and go on to describe his provinces, all the things he ruled. Now, that wasn't in fact done. This is actually Hu Akeshverosh. But yeah, before you get to the Hu Akeshverosh, and the Vilna Gaon, the Rav Eliyahu Vilna, describes it in explains this. He says to truly understand, this is his Perush Derek Remez Illusion, Allusion. And he explains as follows. To really understand Akashverosh, we have to go back to the beginning of creation, like the second pasuk. Haaretz tohu v'bohu v'choshek al panei tehom, and then goes on to say that in the spirit, Hashem's spirit hovered over the waters. Now, those expressions symbolize the four empires, incidentally, which I'll be discussing later in a slightly different context. Tohu represents Babylonia, the ones who destroyed, the king Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the first temple. Second temple, and the Bohu represents the Empire of Persia, which its descendants are in the news today. The third is Yavan, Greece, and Choshek, and that's Choshek. And Panei Tehom represents the current exile of Asa in Rome, which we've been in for almost 2,000 years. Now, the Vilna Gaon then goes on to explain that the letters in Hebrew of Tehom can be rearranged. And if you do, you're going to get the first letter of the following four words: Amalek Amavis, the angel of death. Now, who is the angel of death? He's one of the aspects of the Yetzer Hara. One of them being the Yetzer Hara, who tries to trick people into committing sins, to the point as many as possible and trap him or her. Then, as Malachim, obviously, he's going to go to Hashem, the angel of death, and say, God, this guy, this man and woman's hopeless, time to call him back for judgment. And then once they're called, once they die and come in front of the heavenly court, he will be the prosecutor, Satan. Now, taking this, the Vilna Gaon then goes on to explain that Yetzer Hara is really Akashverosh. And the whole story is the Jewish people fighting their own Yetzer Hara, which was written by Akashverosh. It started when they went to the party that they were told not to go to, where Akashverosh was celebrating his calculation that the Jews were not going to be returned to Bavel, Eretz Israel, and that he therefore used the vessels of the temple and put on the clothes of the Kohen Gadol, all forbidden acts, which he should have died at that time, except he was spared by Hashem to be involved in the events that became Megillus Esther many years later. And so, okay, if Akashverosh is the Yetzer Hara, and he represents evil, so what was the cure? What is Esther's other name? Hadass, which the Vilna Gaon interprets to mean the eighth Chaim, the tree of life. And that tree of life is the Torah. And by doing Torah and mitzvahs, we can counteract the influence of the Yetzer Hara. And that's what the whole Megillus Esther is on a deeper level. Now, obviously, there's an involvement of Haman, as I said, and he played a key part, and they were really partners. Akashverosh represents the Yetzer Hara, and Haman represents doubt, Suffolk, which is used to trick people to follow the Yetzer Hara, as is well known from many sources. Now, that being said, I'd like to put both Bavel and, which I explained briefly before, in the context of how it applies to today. And to do that, I'm going to be doing this through the prism of Sefer Daniel, which is one of the most deep books of Tanakh with many, many layers. The point I'm going to deal with is Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Bavel, the one who destroyed the first temple. And he had disturbing dreams at night, and he didn't know what they meant. And eventually, none of the so-called wise men of Bavel could predict him. He was about to kill everybody, including Daniel, who was also one of his advisors. And Daniel said, give me a chance to interpret the dream. He told that to Nebuchadnezzar's executioner, which he was given the time. Hashem came to him in a dream and told Daniel what the meaning of it was. Now, Nebuchadnezzar was more difficult to deal with than Pharaoh in one sense. Pharaoh had the dream, then asked Yosef to interpret it. He went one step further and figured the only way you can test if the explanations are true is you got to tell me the prophecy also. And Daniel did just that. And I'm only going to quote part of it. It's a fascinating topic on its own for another time. But And he explained, what was the image you were watching? He explained to the king. And na ka malcha chazei havayot elu son achad shagia samamo deka rav hazivai v'yetzera kaem kibal ruach yedechil. You, king, were watching, and behold, a huge image. This image, which was immense and whose brightness was excessive, stood facing you, and its form was fearsome. And what was this image? Husalma Resha Dihava Ta Yehudia the Riyoi the Kesef Meuye in Yerechem de Nachash Shikudi Pazel Beregla Minecha di Pazel Minucha Asaf. And he goes on to explain its head was of fine gold, its breast and arms of silver, its belly and thighs of copper, its legs of iron, and its feet partially of iron and partially of earthware, which is what has been explained, famous expression in English. He has feet of clay, comes from this. And then it goes on to say, Hazeh Haveh Adi to Gezer Evan Vihilo Biyadacha Machat Salama Raglayim El Padea Hasefa. And the Deches Himon. Then he goes and says, you should wash this stone with shoon without hands, and struck the image on its feet of iron and earthware, and crumbled them. And then he goes on to say, then the iron, the earthware, the copper, the silver, and the gold were crumbled together. And it goes on to explain in language that the stone that struck the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth. And that is interpreted as Mount Mashiach, the fifth kingdom that Hashem is going to set up after the other four empires are destroyed. Now, relevant here is the commentary of the Malbim, who was written in the late 1860s, early 1870s, who explains that the four kingdoms of Babel, Persia, copper is is Greece, which at one time Greece under Alexander the Great and his successors ruled most of the known world, except Rome. And then the fourth one, as we explain now, was the Roman Empire, whose descendants are Aesop and Rome, is the Western world, which include the Western Hemisphere, Europe, and other places, and so what is going on? So Malbim explains that what's also being predicted here is that in the days of Ekem Mashiach, the days before Mashiach comes, footsteps of Mashiach, it's also called Chazalot, Mashiach, the birth pangs of Mashiach. In that period, the kingdom of gold and the kingdom of silver will be destroyed by the kingdom of copper, which is Greece, and today would be Greek ideas, and the kingdom of iron, without getting too many interpretations, includes in part Aesop and Rome, the Western world, as of today, as I said. Now, with that introduction, so who will be destroying whom according to the Malvine? Babylon. Who is its who is its successor? Iraq. And I'll speak more about that in a second. And who is Kingdom of Silver? Persia, which is now in its current manifestation, is Iran. And uh, Kingdom of Copper, as I said, is the Greek ideas and Roman. He said those two last empires, the Greek and Roman, what is the Greek and Roman, will destroy the kingdom of gold and silver. We already saw that kingdom of gold had been destroyed with Iraq. When did that occur? A very interesting comparison to what's going on now was, or just to recall events in 1990, Saddam Hussein, Iraq disclaimed Kuwait as its 19th province and invaded it. The the Western world, the Western world, then and the coalition um, attacked Iraq. Now, when was that coalition? That coalition, the coalition was started an air invasion, air war against Iraq in January. However, when was the actual ground invasion? It started on Shabbat Zachor, and then on Purim 5 days later. The timing, obviously, it's all part of Hashem's deeper plans, was not coincidence. And then it was not coincidence, and we're seeing the same pattern reiterating itself now. When did this war start? It started on Shabbat Zachor, and will be and will definitely be continuing to Purim and probably beyond. If we look at this, we see that it's not only in the Persian Empire, as I said, it is now Iran. And it is no coincidence, it's part of Hashem's deeper design, that this is happening now. And this, as I said, now being predicted back over 150 years ago. And I'm going to, and I'm now going to illustrate one more midrash, interestingly enough, that also is significant, that this is indeed the Ek of Mashiach. And when is that? That is, I will explain now. It's from the Midrash Rabbah. Is explained in the Midrash Rabbah. Actually, Midrash Rabbah explained that when will the kind of the Biek of Mashiach and the coming Mashiach, when the horses of Persia is tied to the graves in Eretz Israel, which means when the Persians have killed the Jews, we're seeing that now, unfortunately, there's been some wartime casualties um, through the rocket attacks, and we're seeing now that one of the four steps in the Ekav Mashiach that needs to be taken. It was done by it was stated by Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar. There are many other connections in the Zohar and Yalkut Shimoni beyond the scope of the Devar Torah that would substantiate that, but realize that even though we're going through very challenging times, just like Hashem pulled the strings and manipulated all the events, if one reads the entire Megillah Esther, they couldn't have been without those events. Couldn't have happened except by divine intervention from behind the scenes. And we're seeing the same now, and that is no coincidence. The Shem is behind the scenes here, orchestrating this whole thing, and may let it be successful, and may we soon see the beginning of the Messianic era. I'd like to wish Purim Sameach to everybody, whether they're celebrating outside of the walled city of Yerushalayim or they're celebrating in Yerushalayim, that this, even with all the things going on, it should be a beginning of a much beginner and be a better era, and the end of the Ekav Mashiach and beginning of the redemption. Purim Sameach.